Governor, welcome to Parker County. We are just thrilled that you are here. I am Lisa Flowers with the East Parker County Chamber. I'm the president and CEO, and I want to, before I forget, quickly acknowledge our ambassadors of the Chamber. They're in red coats. They helped set up and facilitate this meeting, and we could not have done this without staff. So Judy, Jordan Giles, walking right over there, and then I don't even know where Gina Vaughn is, but y'all, you need to give them a huge round of applause. And then we have our media team in the back with New River Fellowship. Y'all do a fantastic job. You're always very accommodating, and we really appreciate it. I would also like to acknowledge our sponsors for the event today. Zan and Mike Prince with First Bank Texas. Thank you very much. We appreciate the support. Charlie Gilchrist with Gilchrist Automotive. Lynn Mills with McKnight Title. Jim Martin and Pat Martin with Railhead Realty. Daryl Shriver with Tri-County Electric. Thank you all very much for sponsoring today's event. I would also like to acknowledge Scott Utley, our Parker County Republican chair. He helped secure the governor today. So thank you very much, Scott. Appreciate that. And can I ask all of our elected officials to stand so we can recognize you? It's pretty impressive. Thank you all very much for being here. And then our Chamber Board of Directors, the current Chamber Board, and the incoming Chamber Board. Would y'all all please stand, please? Thank y'all. And then our Parker County Sheriff's Posse. Where are y'all at? Thank y'all. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today and helping. And then we have crumble cookies on the tables, and we would like to acknowledge Rhonda Causey for providing all of those wonderful cookies today. I think they're opening up in Hudson Oaks. And then if everyone in our military and our veterans can please stand so we can acknowledge you, please. Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to welcome Joey Willis, the pastor at New River Fellowship, to lead us in our invocation.
All right, let's pray. So Jesus, we come before you today and we just thank you. We thank you, God, for your grace, that you would love us and give yourself for us, that you're an example of leadership and servanthood for us. God, we just also thank you for covering this country, this state, and this county. And God, I ask that you would bring wisdom and knowledge to all of our leaders, that Lord, you would protect them as they lead, that you would bless them and their families as they serve in all their capacities. I pray, Lord, over this gathering today, and I pray for your protection, your healing hand, and your presence to be with us. I pray that we'd be rooted and established in your love. And I pray, God, that we would grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses all knowledge, and that we may be filled to the full measure of God. And we pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Joey. Anita White with White's Funeral Home will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and Kelly Stumbo with KW Heritage West will lead us in the Texas Pledge. If you will all please stand.
Please join me with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in the Texas Pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to see all of your beautiful faces as we gather here, and thank you again, Governor, We are very blessed to have you here and excited to hear from both Representative King and Senator Springer today as we address the wonderful citizens of Parker County. So it is my honor to introduce Representative King. And just to give you a little bit of background, as state representative for the 61st District, Phil King represents the people of both Parker and Wise County in the Texas legislature. He has earned the reputation as a principle-driven conservative who consistently provides leadership in passing Texas' most sweeping public policy legislation. King currently serves on the State Affairs Committee as well as the Higher Education Committee. King also serves on the National Board of Directors for the American Legislative Exchange Council and was the 2015 National Chair. King also serves as Vice Chair of the Board of Directors for the Texas Conservative Coalition Research Institute. He was a police officer for 15 years for the Fort Worth Police Department and continues to serve in the Texas State Guard. He's a practicing attorney and a small business owner. Representative King and his family have been active members of Trinity Bible Church since 1984. He and his wife Terry are proud parents of 6 children, 10 granddaughters, and 6 grandsons. So it is my honor. Representative King, will you please join me on the stage?
Thanks. Actually, we've got one more grandchild on the way, so kind of excited about number 17. Although Christmas this year, by the way, hi, Governor, good to see you. Christmas this year at our house turned into a super spreader event. So it was funny. The only one that brought it to us was a guest, so we know not to invite any guests anymore to Christmas. So that'll be the deal. But thank you. It's in the introduction. She mentioned, but has there ever been this big a crowd at a chamber event before? This is incredible, Governor. It's not me. I've been here before, and I didn't get this kind of crowd, so it's all you. But in the introduction, they mentioned I represent Parker and Wise counties, and it's kind of been a little bit sad because it's just been such. I just want to say it's just been such a honor, really, for the last 23 years. To get to represent Parker County in the House and Wise County as well. And with that, I'll say that I'm really excited, though. There's a new Senate seat that came up out of redistricting. That's when, they have to, after each census, redraw the political boundary lines. And so there's a new Senate seat that came about, and it has most of Parker County in it, about 60%. And then it really runs all the way from Johnson County through South Tarrant County, all the way out to Brownwood. And so I'm running for that now. So I'm sad that I'm not going to be your state rep anymore. I'm really excited about the opportunity to represent you in the Senate, along with my really dear friend, Drew Springer, who will share Parker County, and that'll be a real pleasure working with him. So I'm excited about that. I know the governor today is going to talk a lot about economic development and job creation and all those great things going on in Texas. And I think Drew's going to talk a lot mainly about transportation and some other economic development issues. So if it's okay, what I thought I'd kind of try to do is just kind of brag on the Texas legislature and the governor just a little bit. We had so many good things. In fact, I will tell you, and I think Drew will probably agree with me, this was the most productive legislative year of all the years that I've been serving in the House. This last year, 2021, but nobody ever heard about any of it because as soon as we finished up, everything kind of got smothered by all the just really bad news coming out of Washington and coming out of the Biden administration, whether it's inflation or Afghanistan or all the vaccine mandates and all the other things. So all the really amazing stuff that got accomplished in this last year really never got talked about. So I thought I might go through some of those highlights just for a minute and kind of brag on Texas a little bit. Before that, though, let me say something about Governor Abbott. And he won't say this, so I'll say it. I'm part of a national organization of legislators called the American Legislative Exchange Council. And last year we commissioned Dr. Art Laffer, and if you remember that name, he was a key, if not the key, economic advisor for President Reagan, and then also one of the three key, along with Stephen Moore and Larry Kudlow, for President Trump. And he also, if you are really nerdy enough to keep up with economics, he developed the Laffer curve, what he's really famous for. But anyway, we commissioned him to go study all 50 states in 2021 and rank the governors from best to worst for how they were on job creation, economic freedom, building an economy in their state. And we want it to be an annual study so that people can look and see what governors are doing good for their states. Well, I will tell you that in the first commission study, Governor Greg Abbott was rated the top governor in 2021 out of all 50 states. And I'm counting on him to pick it up in 2022 also, but we'll just see how it goes. But anyway, Governor, congratulations. That was a big deal. That's a big deal when Art Laffer does that type of study. You can guarantee that it's completely accurate. So 2020. So again, we had an amazing legislative session. Of course, we were down there for 10 months because there was this governor that kept calling us back into special sessions. But we had to do that. It was just a crazy year. Started off with COVID. And, we got off to a really slow start, just like everybody else in business and education and everything we were doing, families, whatever. It was just slowed and stunted by COVID. And then we had, Snowmageddon, Uri came through, and that shut things down. And then we all spent, particularly in Austin, the legislature spent weeks, Tri-County, trying to get everything back up and running and try to figure out how to deal with that. So we were really slowed down with Uri. And then toward about the end of spring, when we really got things beginning to move, and about May, and we got toward June, and we started doing election reform. And then if you remember, all the Democrats in the Texas House went to D.C. to hide out. And the reason they had to go to D.C., they had to get out of state because the Texas House Speaker was going to issue a call on the House, which enables the Department of Public Safety to actually go out and physically bring you to work. And the reason they had to go out of state is because Greg Abbott, they knew, would issue warrants for their arrest. And they had to get outside of his jurisdiction. We couldn't extradite from D.C. And so they had to go to, frankly, a Democrat stronghold. If they'd have gone to a Republican state, they could have extradited. So they left, and they were gone for months. So the whole year should have just spelled a legislative disaster for the state of Texas at a time we had a lot of things we really needed to work on. But what I want to report to you is I'm really hoping the Democrats, and I hate to be political here, but I'm going to do it. I really hope that they start leaving every session because we got so much done while they were gone. We got everything ready. As soon as they came back, we just zipped it right through. And I just want to run through some of those highlights. First off, the big thing that caught us all off guard was some problems we had in the election process. None in Parker County, but in a number of counties, particularly large urban areas around the state, we just had some election fraud. So we passed massive election reform. And I want to tell you that the Heritage Institute, which is one of the leading most respected think tanks in America, they just finished a study, an analysis of all the states, because every state had done, or a number of states had done election reform last year, and they just came out with a report that said Texas now has the 6th strongest election law protection in the country. So we did a great job on election reform. We can go vote. It's going to be easier to vote this time, and it's going to be much harder to cheat. I'm pro-life. Texas is now the most pro-life state in the United States, bar none. And if the Supreme Court will leave what we did alone, we will stay that way. Religious liberty. Now, I think everybody in this room thought we still had something called the First Amendment that said you can't interfere with anything that someone is trying to do in worship, practice of their faith, church attendance. But, some of our more urban areas, their leadership didn't understand that. And so you passed a constitutional amendment by vote last November that now just makes it doubly clear in the Texas Constitution that no government entity in the state of Texas can tell you when and you can and cannot go to church. We had a lot of some of our larger cities, again, none of this in Parker County, but in some of our larger communities, they decided that the best way to combat crime was to get rid of your law enforcement. And so they began to defund their police. It got so bad that in Austin that we actually discussed very seriously the state of Texas DPS taking over Austin PD in downtown, because you couldn't even literally walk downtown safely because of all the things that were going on. But anyway, we passed legislation that made it clearly illegal to defund your law enforcement organizations in the state of Texas. It was a tough budget year, but even with that, we fully met a very bold commitment that we had made a couple of years ago to fully fund public education, and we met that commitment even in a very tough budget year. CRT, which has nothing to do with protecting against racial prejudice, it just does just the opposite. It began to infiltrate so many of our schools and education institutions. We passed one statute, very comprehensive one, that prohibited that being introduced into our public schools. It didn't quite work right because it's such a moving target and something we're going to have to stay after, by the way. But so we passed another comprehensive set of legislation to prohibit any CRT being introduced into our public schools in Texas. UIL, and it's amazing to me that we would ever have to even deal with this. But we also prohibited boys playing in girls' sports in any of our schools in Parker County or across the state. Isn't it amazing we ever even had to think about that, but we had to do it. Something that's really important to us here in Parker County, where we have so many properties just on the outskirts of cities and that are ready to be developed. The rollback tax, which is such a suppression on that development, we eliminated the interest on that rollback tax, which will reduce property taxes over the next 5 years by over $480 million across the state. It's a huge thing for Parker County. Oil and gas industry is about 35% of our state economy. I mean, we can make America, we had made America in Texas energy independent. We can do it again if we can just have some changes up in D.C. that we had just a few years ago. But that's 35% of our economy. Huge job creator, very, very important right here in Parker County. The woke economic world of business funding had begun to prohibit funding of oil and gas ventures in the state, particularly for our independent producers, which are really the background of those jobs and that development. So Texas did what no other state has done. We actually put in place prohibitions, penalties that will stop discrimination against oil and gas business ventures and funding opportunities in the state. And it's got all of Wall Street. I can tell you that BlackRock has been down at the Capitol daily in recent weeks, going door to door, trying to say, how do they get out of this trouble? Because they know they need to do business in Texas. So we're the first state to ever jump in the middle of that woke economic blockade and make sure that there's funding available for our jobs in Texas. And then finally, just one more key thing. We got worried that someday Texas may not have a legislature and a governor that has the same principles that we all share economically, of being fiscally responsible. So just to be careful, just to see what, to avoid what the future might bring, we put permanent legislation in place that puts caps on the growth of state government and puts caps. It basically holds it at the level of population increase and inflation, just to make sure that Texas always was not, frankly, just spending all the money. So these are just some of the highlights. I could go on, but I will tell you that under the leadership of Greg Abbott and a really lot of good members of the Texas legislature, we had the best year, at least in the 23 years I've been in the House. And I'm so excited about next time, because I think we're all excited and pumped about having that same kind of year. And so thank you for giving me the privilege to come and serve as your state rep. And I'm really, really looking forward to getting to expand that and serve you in the Texas Senate. So thanks again. And Governor, I look forward to hearing you in a minute. And I think Drew Springer is going to get introduced by someone. Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you so much, Representative. We are blessed here in East Parker County to have Phil King and Drew Springer that have totally stood up and advocated for our cities. We have the most fantastic cities in the state of Texas right here in Parker County. And our school districts are second to none and do amazing things. And so we are so proud that you have stood up and advocated for us and really helped us through some tough times, and know that you'll continue to do that as you move forward. Let me take a moment now and introduce you to Senator Drew Springer. He's a lifelong conservative Christian, fights to preserve traditional Texas values, promote economic development, and undo burdensome regulations. Drew's a champion for the taxpayers. He fights for pro-life legislation and defends the Second Amendment. He was elected to the Texas House in 2013 and was consistently ranked among the top conservatives. In his first session in the Senate, he was ranked as the second most conservative Senate member and one of the top 3 effective freshmen in the last 20 years. Drew grew up in Weatherford, where he attended Weatherford High School. He went on to attend Weatherford College and then the University of North Texas, where he was a letterman and received his accounting degree. He spent 15 years working for a Texas railcar company, where he started as an accountant and rose to be president of 3 divisions. He left to join his father's financial services company, where he specialized in agricultural futures and securities for the last 16 years. Drew and his wife of 30 years, Lydia, reside in Munster, where they are blessed to have raised their 3 children and welcomed their first grandson in 2020. The family's active members of Sacred Heart Catholic Church, where Drew serves on the Finance Council. And additionally, Drew has been a volunteer fireman for 15 years. Will you please join me in welcoming to the stage Senator Drew Springer.
Well, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be in Parker County, where I spent so many formative years growing up. And I want to thank Lisa and the Chamber for putting this together. And Phil's right. It's phenomenal to see this room filled. I think it was almost just about a year ago that I was standing on the stage. I definitely like the fact that Phil was standing up here rather than who was standing on the stage with me last time. That was my opponent, for those who don't remember. But Phil's exactly right. We had a phenomenal session. And truthfully, the most conservative session in Texas history. There's people who will argue, well, you didn't do this or you did that, and I don't like it. It's never perfect. We're 30 million Texans. But we created the foundation that will continue to live on for generations. And the things that Phil mentioned that we both worked on to make sure that got done. Second Amendment rights, another key cornerstone of this phenomenal session. Border security, making sure we went from $800 million to $3 billion to do what Joe Biden won't do in Washington. And so we did the things like that to protect Texas, because Parker County may not be on the southern border, but what happens on the southern border affects Parker County. And so we know that we've got to continue to find creative solutions when Washington won't do what they're supposed to do. One of the things we did in the $250 million or billion dollar budget we did, about $30 billion for TxDOT. We know we need more roads. We know we have to have that commitment to the core functions of government and making sure we're doing those. We have several projects going on right now in Parker County, resurfacing, new bridges, safety items. But one of the things as we look forward to the future, and I look forward to working with Phil on this in the Senate, is we just had a study done late last year to study I-20 and the problems on I-20. I can tell you, there's nobody in this room who doesn't know what the problem is. We don't have enough lanes to get from when I got my driver's license in 1981, 40 years ago. And when I drove from Brock's to Jerry Chevrolet, it was 2 lanes back then, and it's still 2 lanes today. We need to widen that. So it's got to be a priority that we continue to push. And we've got money now from the federal government with some of the CARES Act. We'll have roughly $30 billion to spend on federal infrastructure. That's the interstate system. And we need to make sure that Parker County is at the front of the line, as we have seen phenomenal growth. It was 44,000 people in 1980. And now we're over 150,000 in Parker County, and I don't think we're going to see growth stop whatsoever. You know, we know as we have seen cities don't grow as much as they did, the annexations, and we've changed some of the rules on those. We've seen developments come out, municipal utility districts called MUDs, as developers continue to grow the communities that grow Parker County. One of the things that we know we need to work on is how to deal with transportation infrastructure and how we can make sure these developments have the roads to get in and out of their subdivisions. And one of the things we weren't able to do last session was to work on that in the interim. Most of the things that Phil and I have done for the last 10 years is working during the interim to come up with the solutions we need for Texas. COVID shut us down from having those last session. I look forward, once we get past the March 1 primary, to be able to dive into that with the rest of the Senate and the rest of the House to come up to the solutions we need to make sure that folks can get to and from their house in a timely fashion. Economic development. You know, we have seen phenomenal growth in the state. I think the governor will probably mention that we're going to once again win the Governor's Cup for 2021, if it hasn't been announced already. We knew in January 2021 we were going to win it when there was over 190 companies looking to relocate to the state of Texas. We used the enterprise fund last year to make sure Wagner's structural fiberglass manufacturing company is coming to Parker County with $1.8 million that the state incentivized them to come. Yeah, that's 300 jobs that they're bringing. And we know as we give those throughout the state that we're not just competing, you know, is it Parker County versus Grayson County? No. We're incentivizing when we're competing against other states, but we also compete with other places around the world. We had a $30 billion Texas Instrument facility that was announced in Sherman, Texas. It's going to bring 1,000 jobs up there. It was a small amount that the state had to give. Many times, the governor meets with the CEOs, and he doesn't even have to give them any money. He can just say, hey, look, we'll cut your red tape. If you go to New York, it's going to take you 6 months to get licensing. Hey, I brought the head of TCQ and everybody else in here right now. We're ready to issue your permits today. And so it's that kind of creative thinking that we continue to see the growth in Texas and make sure those continue on. We need to make sure we have those tools in the toolbox. You know, I mentioned the enterprise fund. Chapter 313, we've got to redo that to make sure that that continues. It expires at the end of this year. That way we continue to bring those companies that have heavy property cost and they can't afford all the property taxes, and we give them a break for 10 years. Phenomenal growth. That's why TI came. We've got the special event fund. That's a big one for Parker County because that allows us to have the National Cutting Horse Championship in Texas. And as I sit here, and thank goodness I'm not in Cook County because they always tried to tell me that they were the cutting horse capital of Texas. And I said, I'm sorry, I grew up in Parker County, guys. It's not y'all. So it did give me a little bit of trouble back home. One of the things, though, that's part of economic development is our infrastructure and making sure we have the right things. And one of the things we passed this session was rural broadband, because we know no matter where a business is or where a kid is growing up, they need access to rural broadband to make sure that they can be educated, where they can check out consumers on point of order sales. And so Phil and I worked together to make sure that we got that through and signed into law. You know, Phil talked a little bit about redistricting. And I got to tell you, some people have asked me because, how did you come up with the Senate maps? Because we now look more like congressional maps because we don't have the whole county rule that the House has. We wanted to make sure that Texas Senate stays red for the next 10 years. And we actually think we'll go from 18 Republican senators to 19 with the addition of Phil King. We also think that there's a good chance that the policies that the Democrats are pushing in Texas and Washington is turning off our fellow conservatives in the border. And that's our Hispanic brothers and sisters that understand that they're pro-life, limited government, and this stuff they're selling in Washington just isn't working. And I look forward to us picking up another Senate seat from Senator Lucio as we compete in November to flip that one to make sure that we have 20. So Phil and I will actually have the benefit in North Texas to have the two most conservative Senate districts. I went from a 74 plus Trump to a 61. They called me the biggest loser. But that was fine because I knew it was for the greater good. And so we know we are set up for success in North Texas to make sure we continue to have the policies that we need to continue on. And I've got to say, last session, and really, it started back in 2011. My first phone call was not to my wife when I thought about running for state representative. I was state rep for 4 terms, for those of y'all who don't know. Elected in 2013. My first call was to Phil King. And Phil King lied to me. He said, Drew, you're only going to work about an hour a day when you're in the interim. I'm looking for that 1 hour a day. But no, other than that, everything Phil said has been massively helpful. He was a mentor in the House. We worked hand in hand last session to get that phenomenal things done for Texas and for Parker County. And I look forward to having him with me in the state Senate to where Parker County has 2 senators. That's 2 out of 31. That is extremely powerful when 2 of us are leaning on the appropriations chair, the transportation chair, and on and on and on. And so it's going to be a phenomenal thing to have Phil there, and I hope everybody supports him. And with that, it is my honor and my privilege to continue to represent you, but also to introduce our phenomenal Texas governor. Governor Abbott was named the best governor in the nation in 2020. Governor Greg Abbott continues to build on a record of strong conservative leader who will fight to preserve Texas values and ensure the Lone Star State remains the best place to raise a family, build a business, and create greater opportunities for all. Texas works when Texans work, and under Greg Abbott, careful stewardship of the 9th largest economy in the world, the Lone Star State has added over 1 million new jobs during the first 5 years of administration and has led the nation in job creation since 2019. And with the great things happening in Parker County, number 8, Italy, you better watch out, we're about to pass you soon. So with the governor's unwavering commitment to expanding opportunities for all hardworking Texas, the Lone Star State is the top state for attracting job-creating capital investment, and among the top states for jobs created for African Americans, Hispanics, women, and veteran-owned businesses. He's addressing the state's most pressing issues. As the nation and world continues to battle with global pandemic, Greg Abbott has worked to build a healthier, safer, freer, and more prosperous future for all Texans. In the 87th legislative session, the governor focused to ensure that Texans have access to high-quality health care, improve public safety, get Texans back to work, and unleashing the state's robust, resilient economy. Landmark legislation passed in the previous session includes the governor's priorities that Texans demanded: reining in skyrocketing property taxes, investing more in our classrooms and teachers, keeping our schools safe, combating human trafficking, and improving disaster preparedness and response. Other notable successes include protecting free speech on campus, ensuring medical care for babies born after attempted abortions, and ensuring election integrity, and many, many more. These build on Governor Greg Abbott's prior legislation successes, making Texas even freer, stronger, safer, smarter, and investing in critical border security, reforming child protective services, investing more in earlier and higher education, cutting billions in taxes to stimulate job growth, reining in regulatory regimes that strangle innovation, improving Texas roads, and expanding protections for Texas constitutional rights. Greg Abbott is defined by just greatness. No, before his election in 2014, and I might have had to put my glasses on. You can tell it's a little. You can see I'm stepping back. I finally have reached that age. As the 48th governor of Texas, Greg Abbott was the 50th strongest in leading as Attorney General in Texas, earning the nation's reputation as defending religious liberties and protecting Texas communities and children. He also previously served as the justice on the Texas Supreme Court and as the state district judge in Harris County. A native to Texas and a sportsman and hunter, Greg Abbott was born in Senate District 30, Wichita Falls, and was raised in Duncanville. After graduating the University of Texas at Austin, he earned his law degree from Vanderbilt University Law School. And Governor, I don't know if you know this, but the Vandy starting quarterback is none other than Weatherford's own Ken Seals. Shortly after graduation from law school, he was partially paralyzed by a falling tree while jogging. From his faith and family, he gained strength, recognizing our lives are not defined by our challenges, but how we respond to them. Governor Abbott and his wife, Cecilia, a former teacher, principal, and the first Hispanic lady of Texas, celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary just a few months ago. Their daughter, Audrey, is a recent college graduate. And now please join me in welcoming the man that's going to kick Beto's tail in November, Governor Greg Abbott.
Thank you all very much. Well, Drew, thank you for your very kind words, and more importantly, thank you for your leadership in the Senate this past session. And Phil King, I've lost track of where you are geographically right now. They're right in front. As you could tell earlier up here, with the lights in your face, you can always see exactly who's out there. But listen, y'all both said it exactly right. During this last session, we accomplished more than what any other session had ever accomplished. Thank you for y'all's conservative leadership to make sure we were able to achieve so much. Give it up for Drew Springer and Phil King for the great job that they do. I want to give a shout out to Lisa Flowers and the East Parker County Chamber of Commerce. Thank you and the entire team for all that you do to grow the economy, to create more jobs, and to constantly work on what really needs to be done. And that is to advance and improve all sectors of Parker County. And I want to say thank you also to your pastor who is opening up this wonderful church. And I saw him up here earlier, but I lost track of him. Pastor, where are you right now? Right back here. Pastor, thank you so much. So I actually do have the opportunity to speak to chambers of commerce a lot. However, I think this is the first time I have ever spoken to a chamber of commerce in a church. And so as a result, I am really going to start my remarks today down a different pathway. You know, Drew Springer was talking about how I was born in Wichita Falls. As a kid born and growing up in Wichita Falls, I can guarantee you, I had no idea I was going to be governor of Texas. But also Drew talked about an event in my life during which I can assure you I had no idea I was going to be governor. It was an event he was talking about when, after graduating from law school, I was out running one day when that massive tree crashed down onto my back, leaving me immediately paralyzed with fragments of my vertebrae piercing my spinal cord. Never able to walk again. Only been married a couple of years at the time. I had no idea that I would wind up one day celebrating my 40th anniversary, and certainly had no idea that I would go from laying in a hospital bed for months on end to one day being the leader of this state. But it reminds me exactly of Matthew chapter 19, verse 26. And that is, with man alone, things are impossible. But with God, all things are possible. The pastor talked about the grace of God, and with the grace of God, and with the good fortune of living in the Lone Star State, we are in a state where a young man can literally have his life broken in half and still rise up and be governor of this great state. Anything can be done with God in the great state of Texas. It was an honor to join with so many business leaders and job creators throughout the entire region. We appreciate what you do for the Texas economy. And with all of us working together, whether you are in Parker County or Tarrant County or any other location in the state of Texas, working together, we have created Texas into an economic juggernaut. Get these facts about the Texas that we live in today. Every year that I've been governor, Texas has been ranked the #1 state in the United States to do business. Every year that I've been governor, Texas has been ranked the #1 state in the United States for new economic development projects, just like the ones that Parker County tries to bring here. People are flocking here because of the economic environment that we've created. Little known facts, but hugely important to our economy. For 19 years in a row, Texas has been the #1 state in the United States for exports, including for 8 years in a row, the #1 state in the United States for the export of technology. Now, a lot of what I've talked about you may view or construe as being something that involves large businesses. One thing is, Governor, that I know, and that is the true beating heart of the business community in Texas are our small businesses. 9 out of 10 businesses in Texas are small businesses, and they employ about half of all Texans. And so it may come as no surprise to know that Texas now also ranks as #1 amongst all the states in America as the best state in America to start a small business. When you combine together all of the large and small businesses in our state, it has led to a catapulting of the state of Texas into the international rankings economically. Before COVID, Texas, if it were its own country, we would have had the 10th largest economy in the entire world. That is no longer true today, because even during the time of COVID, because we were open, because businesses have flourished almost like never before, Texas now has increased or climbed the international rankings. And as we gather here in Parker County today, Texas has the 9th largest economy in the entire world. So who do we pass? We surpassed Brazil over the past year. So Texas has a larger economy than Brazil. Texas has a larger economy than our 2 international neighbors, Mexico and Canada. Texas has a larger economy than countries like Australia. And Texas even has a larger economy than the country of Russia. And that makes me more powerful than Putin. One thing that we focus on in the Capitol, we constantly look for ways that we can help our businesses grow. And we do that through policies that we seek to pass. And helping businesses during the time of COVID was of paramount importance. And so we worked together to make a promise to all the businesses that opened and operated during the time of COVID that we would help them by doing things like passing COVID liability protection to liability protect those who open safely during the time of COVID. We promised to expand broadband access to regions across the entire state. As you've seen during the time of COVID, is absolutely essential, whether you're working from home or in an office, that you have access to broadband. But on top of that, we found it to be even more important that we deliver broadband access to the rural regions in the great state of Texas. We passed the law to make sure that does get done. And we also did something that you could only hope that you would ever see come out of Washington, D.C. And candidly, I'm not sure any of us will ever see it. We passed a balanced budget with absolutely no new taxes. Phil King made a reference to something that must be emphasized to put this in context. And that is when we pass laws, part of it is to address issues at that particular time. But part of what we seek to do is we try to set a legacy for what will happen in future generations. We want to help the people in this room, but we want to help your children and their children also. And one of the best ways we can do that is to pass laws that will ensure that the future generations will benefit from the same type of Texas that we have inherited. So one of the things he talked about that we did that's enormously important is we passed what's called a conservative budget limit, limiting the growth of government in the future. And this coexists with another law that we passed the previous session that you all voted on in a constitutional amendment. In Texas is good and it attracts businesses because we have no income tax in the state. But we wanted to make sure it stayed that way for your children and their grandchildren. And so we actually amended the Constitution to constitutionally prohibit an income tax in the Lone Star State. We also promised to provide relief with regard to franchise taxes and unemployment taxes. You need to understand the magnitude of what this really meant. As you might imagine, with what happened in the early stages of COVID, the backup of unemployment taxes was enormous. And if businesses had to make up that backlog with what they pay into the unemployment tax system, it would have imposed a hardship on them. So we made the decision that we would use $7 billion of money available to us to buy down all of that backlog of unemployment taxes so that we would provide that relief directly to our businesses so you would not have to bear the burden of being responsible for those unemployment taxes. So Parker County obviously is a large part of this business community that we gather with today. And we've seen and heard about the numbers of the growth that you are seeing, and it's exponential and it's remarkable, really. But we know that communities are made up of more than just things like jobs and going to work. We know that a core component of a lot of communities is your schools. And we constantly work on ways to improve your schools. So I'm a product of public schools from various areas. I went to kindergarten in Wichita Falls, but went to elementary school over in Longview, and went to junior high and high school over in Duncanville. And I've seen the power of what public schools can provide to us. And I can tell you this, when you look at what we have provided funding-wise over the past few sessions, there is no governor in the history of Texas that has provided more funding to our public schools than I have. We strongly support your public schools here in Parker County and across the entire state of Texas. So by and large, our schools are doing great. But that doesn't mean that we don't also always look for ways in which we can make either the schools better or make the pathway of the people going through the education process better. Let me give you a couple of examples. For one, we worked on strategies that put the individual in charge of their own education path to choose the pathway that is best for them. For example, we know that college is an aspiration and a dream for so many people, and they go to college and they get a great degree and they go to a high-paying job. But at the same time, we know that college is not the right pathway for everybody. Instead, a career may be a better option. So we championed technical education. And I signed a law to support apprenticeship programs that train Texans for good-paying jobs. As just one example, I went to a business called S&B Engineers just outside of Houston, Texas, that was using this apprenticeship program. And while they're getting an understanding of the way the program worked, I met one of the people who was one of the products of their apprenticeship program. It was a young woman who 4 years before I met her, she told me that she was homeless. But after learning about this apprenticeship program, getting the training that she was able to get, and then working her way up at S&B Engineers, she told me that she now owned her own home. And I asked her how much she's making. And when she told me, I said, think about this. 4 years ago, you had no income and you were homeless. Today, you not only have a home, you're making more than the governor of Texas. That is what these programs are able to achieve. It's important that we understand that. But we've also seen areas in our schools where reform is needed. Phil King made reference to one of these that I want to expand upon a little bit. Oftentimes we see some of these issues bubble up in some other states before they arise in Texas. And that, I think, is exactly the case as it concerns the teaching or the use of what is known as critical race theory. Phil referenced it as CRT. We need to understand exactly what this is and exactly what is going on and the extent to which it is or may be used in Texas schools. The fact of the matter is I had books provided to me of young students in elementary school who are being taught critical race theory in schools in Texas. And that's exactly why we passed these bills. Because what they were using critical race theory for, they are trying to rewrite the history of the United States of America. And at the same time, redesign the future along a different pathway that's different from the exceptionalism that made America what it is. And even worse, what critical race theory really does, it separates and divides people and categorizes them on the basis of race, and then it pits them against each other, attacking each other, stoking hostility, simply because of the race of a person. This is contrary to the fundamental principles of the United States of America. It also contradicts the teachings of Martin Luther King Jr. himself, where he said, we are not to be judged by the color of our skin, but instead we're to be judged by the content of our character. That is what Texas stands for. So not only did we pass laws that ban the teaching or use of critical race theory, we banned it in every subject, in every grade, in every public school in the entire state of Texas, and Texas now has the strongest ban on critical race theory of any state in the United States of America. But knowing full well the role that our schools play in our kids' lives, also in the context of the fact that my wife is a former teacher and principal herself, I can tell you this: no government program can replace the role that parents play in the education of their children. The fact of the matter is that parents are losing a voice when it comes to their child's education and even their healthcare issues. Many parents feel powerless to even be able to do anything about it. That must end. And so later on tonight, I am announcing a Parents' Bill of Rights to restore parents as the primary decision maker for their child's education and health care matters. Parents do matter. We cannot live without them. Most of the laws that we pass would be solved or preempted if we had parents fully engaged in their children's lives. Parents do matter. So does public safety. You know, when you think about what chamber issues are, part of chamber issues is to be able to attract more businesses to your community. And what businesses look to and what families who work for those businesses look to is, in part, your schools. But there's something else they look to, maybe even more keenly. And that is, how safe is that community? Are we going to be safe living there, or are we going to be under assault? Have y'all seen these images on TV in places like San Francisco and Chicago? We have smash and grab going on seemingly endlessly day after day after day. It's one of the reasons why you have so many people fleeing those areas. But look at places like Los Angeles and San Francisco, Portland and Seattle, Minneapolis and New York and other places like that. What we've seen time and again, and that is that bad policy that's making its rounds across the country is destroying safety within communities. And that in turn is causing people to flee those areas. And as a result, when we saw this notion rise up around the country that was being promoted by radical liberals in all these cities I just mentioned and others, of the leftist agenda idea that they were going to make their community safer, supposedly, by defunding the police, I said, not on my watch as governor, when we have a state that defunds our police. This is Texas. We don't disrespect our law enforcement officers. We support our law enforcement officers in this great state. But in Texas, there's always one. There's always the exception. Y'all are giggling. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas. Always trying to copy the leftist agenda that we see in these other states. And Austin, Texas defunded their police. The result was predictable. This past year, 2021, Austin saw an all-time record in the number of murders. When you defund law enforcement, when you de-emphasize the role that law enforcement is supposed to play, it leads to increases in crime. It's just that simple. And that's exactly why I worked with these members of the legislature to pass a law that will defund any city that defunds police in Texas. So after I signed that law, and as the days were counting down until it went into effect, Austin was scrambling to scrape together the funds they needed to refund the more than $100 million they had defunded the police. Austin now has fully refunded the defunding of law enforcement they had originally imposed. There is another reckless and dangerous issue that is going around the country, but also has surfaced meaningfully in Texas. I doubt, however, it exists in Parker County. It's this issue about releasing dangerous criminals who've been arrested from jail with either no or low bond to go back out on the streets, only to watch them wreak havoc by harming or robbing or even killing others. In Harris County, I've heard that over the past 2 years, there have been more than 100 people killed by people who were released on bail, who should have been kept behind bars. That's unacceptable. That is governmental malpractice, to be releasing people out of jail who go on and kill somebody else. And that's exactly why we passed bail reform this last session, to keep dangerous criminals locked up behind bars. But as it concerns safety issues, there probably is not a more profound public safety issue in Texas today than what we are grappling with as a result of the open border policies imposed on the United States by the President of the United States himself. A president who is ignoring the Constitution as well as ignoring laws passed by the United States Congress. The fact of the matter is, there were 4 things that were imposed by President Trump that had led to the lowest number of border crossings in multiple decades. 1 is the Remain in Mexico policy. 2 is the Title 42 policy that denied people from coming across the border because of health care reasons. Number 3 is to end the catch and release program. And number 4 is to build a border wall. Those 4 things decrease and dramatically reduce border crossings and led to a much safer state. Because Biden came in and not only got rid of all 4 of those things, but he has really tied the hands and dramatically reduced the amount of ICE who are involved in the process, tied the hands and the role of the Border Patrol. It is now completely open borders. We're having, this past year, close to 2 million people across the entire border who came across illegally from more than 150 countries across the entire globe, including countries that are sponsors of terrorism. You would think that alone would cause the President of the United States to step up and do something to stop people from terrorist-based nations from coming across the border, but that will not awaken Joe Biden to step up and do his job. So Texas is stepping up and doing the federal government's job. With this $3 billion the state legislature passed, Texas is securing our border. In part, that money is being used to fund the National Guard and the Texas Department of Public Safety, who were at the border actually physically securing the border. They're also cracking down on the deadly, dangerous importation of a drug that I know has also penetrated Parker County. And it's the drug called fentanyl. Fentanyl is one of the most deadly drugs that exist. For the most part, it had been and may still be mostly manufactured in China, smuggled through Mexico. 2 milligrams of fentanyl is a deadly dose. 2 milligrams of fentanyl is smaller than 2 grains of salt. Law enforcement in Texas over the past year have seized enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in Texas, California, Illinois, New York, and Florida combined. Is deadly. I've known people personally in Texas who lost their life because of fentanyl. I know from having worked with the sheriff in Tarrant County, is infiltrated Tarrant County. And candidly, it infiltrates counties like Parker County, maybe without you even knowing about it. And that's exactly why we have the Texas Department of Public Safety in the front line, making sure we seize as much of that fentanyl and arrest the smugglers of those drugs and put them behind bars where they deserve to be. And we made it easier this session because we actually wrote a law that I signed that we never knew we had to have before. A new law exists in Texas that makes it a felony to either manufacture or to distribute the drug of fentanyl in Texas. Now, there's another horrific crime that takes place because of Biden's open border policies. It's the horrific crime of human trafficking. If you really know what's going on the border, you know that especially every woman and child coming across the border, and almost everybody coming across the border, is going to be abused and assaulted in multiple kinds of ways. Many women and those children are being trafficked. I know they're being trafficked in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth regions, including right here in Parker County. And it is a direct consequence of these open border policies. To deal with it, I signed 15 laws just this past session to crack down on this heinous crime. We will not stop until we eradicate the crime of human trafficking in Texas. And to step it up, of all things, already Texas is doing more than any other state has ever done in the history of the United States of America to secure our border. But to top it off, now Texas is building our own border wall. It's about safety. It's about your safety. It's about the safety of those who live on the border. As much as you want to see something done with regard to border security, you should listen to the people who live on the border and the ranch owners down there and the way that they talk about their safety. We all have an obligation, all of us leaders, whether it's myself or your state senator or representative or your local leaders. We got to keep your community safe. Safe communities, low taxes, reasonable regulations, a constant vision toward prosperity. That's what leads to economic development. That's what leads to all these relocations that Drew Springer was talking about. It also is what leads to so many people making the conscious decision that they now know the best place for them to live is Parker County. That's why you're seeing growth here. People may be trying to get away from unsafe conditions or get away from a liberal agenda or whatever the reason. They know that Parker County is a better and safer place for them to be able to live. So my commitment to you is we in Austin will continue to promote the policies that will allow you and support you in continuing to make Parker County so attractive. We will keep your taxes low. We will keep regulations reasonable and predictable. We will work side by side with your law enforcement officers to keep your community safe. And we will develop the best workforce in the United States of America. And we will continue to work with you every step of the way, because our bottom line is this: we want you to succeed. We need you to succeed, because when you succeed, Texas succeeds. And when we work together, Texas is and will remain the best state in the greatest country in the history of the world. Thank you all. God bless you all. And God bless the great state of Texas. Thank you all very much.